Welcome everyone to today's podcast with Dr. Neville Lawrence. My name is Irene Zempi. I am the chair of the BSc Hate Crime Network, and my co-hosts for today's podcast are Dr. Rachel Keeley, Deputy Chair of the Hate Crime Network, and also Dr. Nathan Hall, also committee member of the Hate Crime Network. Stephen Lawrence was murdered in a racially motivated attack on the 22nd of April 1993 in South London. A public inquiry in 1999 concluded that the original investigation into Stephen Lawrence's murder was incompetent. It also labeled the Met Police force as institutionally racist. 5 men were arrested over the murder, with only 2 finally convicted in 2012. They have never taken responsibility for their crime. Throughout this time, the Lawrence family has been at the forefront of the fight for justice, with the support of high-profile people such as Nelson Mandela. It's a huge privilege to have Dr. Lawrence with us today. Dr. Lawrence, can you please share with us some of the key moments in your campaign for justice for Stephen?
Well, some of the key moments in the campaign for Stephen, for murder of my son to be solved, started with us finding out that the people who were supposed to be, namely the Metropolitan Police, weren't taking the case seriously. I used to watch a program on TV where they showed what happened when somebody's family was either injured or anything to do with crime. The following morning, or maybe the same day, the officer would come to the family's house and sit them down and explain to them what happened the night before. When those 2 officers came to my house that morning after Stephen's murder, and we were requested to be told what happened, they tell us that they couldn't tell us anything. They then came into our house after I had got up early to call friends and family to tell them about the murder of my son. These 2 officers then came into my house, saw some people who had come to support the family, and started writing their names down. I then asked them why they were doing this, because these people that was in my house weren't involved in the crime, so you shouldn't be writing down these people's names for no reason. Anyway, after they stopped, we went upstairs again, asking for them to explain what had happened that night, because the boy that was with Stephen that night was so traumatized that he couldn't explain and tell us what happened. We then found out that these officers were holding this boy who was almost killed with my son overnight and saying that he was the one who stabbed my son to death. So straight away, the family started to worry, thinking that these people weren't really serious about trying to solve the crime.
Thank you. Can you please share with us some of your recollections of the police and media responses at the time of Stephen's murder?
Because we were ordinary people and we didn't have the public here, we started to wonder what would happen, because we needed to publicize what had happened to Stephen. We then made the decision to apply to have a solicitor to kind of guide us. We started going to a few radio stations at first, and then a few BBC programs. One of the things that sometimes I think that the Heavenly Father was guiding over our family was, in a few weeks, we had all different organizations come into the house trying to help, but we had to be very careful because we didn't want some of the organizations that we heard were trying to do this to kind of forward themselves instead of making sure that the family was seen as a person who didn't try to involve with violence, but try to get justice for a son. We then went to the BBC one morning to do a program. We got the news that Nelson Mandela had arrived from South Africa and had requested to see the family. We were so full of joy that we couldn't even believe that this was going to happen, that we were actually going to see Nelson Mandela. We waited that morning in a hotel down in the West End. And I've always wanted to see what Nelson Mandela looked like after being in prison for so many years. There were no photographs because the day when Nelson Mandela was supposed to be released, I sat in front of the television for almost the whole day waiting to see him. They didn't release him until the following Sunday, so I didn't get to see him. I then saw this tall, handsome-looking man coming towards us in the hotel room, and I'm thinking to myself, is this true? Am I going to be seeing Nelson Mandela? He came and he sat down with the family and he made some remarks about Black lives are cheap in South Africa, and he didn't think it was the same in England. He made a statement. For the very first time, we had all the TV, radio station, and everybody in that room that morning. And the story about Stephen started to spread all over the place. Unfortunately, I think about a week or so later, there was something down in Welling where there was a fight and houses were broken into and cars and things were all over the place. All the newspapers carried that story. We bought the Daily Mail that evening, that morning, to see what was being said. We were put in the middle of all this mayhem, as if we were part of this, mayhem that happened in Welling. I used to be a plaster decorator. I used to do a lot of building work. I worked for Paul Dacre House. I did a beautiful job for him. I also used to take my children to some of the jobs that I did because they saw me going out in the morning. They never knew what I was doing. So when I finished the apartment or anything, I used to take them and show them what I'm doing, like as a part of looking after my family. In a way, I'm thinking it was a good thing to do because the morning when I took my children to Paul Dacre's house, he was there, and he met my 3 children. I then called the newspaper to find out why they had put the family in the middle of all this mayhem, as if we were part of this thing. He apologized to us and tell me that he didn't know it was me. The paper started to run stories as often as possible for us and kind of publicize what was happening to the family, which was quite good. When it came on to the fact that we were going to be when we were deciding whether to bury Stephen in England or to take him abroad because of all the vandalism that was happening to some of the other families, we decided that we were going to take Stephen's body to Jamaica because Stephen had requested that he was going to finish his architectural, and when he was kind of more prominent, he was going to move back to Jamaica. Since he was dead, we then decided that he wasn't able to do that himself, so we were going to take him home. The Daily Mail was the only newspaper at the time that offered to help us with the burial of Stephen in Jamaica. It gave us some funds to help us with that. That's the only paper that did that. So I felt really grateful to the paper. And also the Daily Mail put the 5 people that were supposed to be involved in Stephen murder on the front page of their newspaper and said, "Murderers, if you want to, sue us." And I think that was really a brilliant thing to do for us.
This year marks the 30th year anniversary of Stephen's murder. A recent report by Baroness Louise Casey found that the Metropolitan Police are guilty of institutional racism, sexism and homophobia, which shows that little has changed since the Stephen Lawrence inquiry back in 1999, which found that the force was institutionally racist. Also, as a result of the Black Lives Matter movement, there's been a renewed spotlight on issues of racism and disproportionality in policing and criminal justice, such as the treatment of Black people by the criminal justice system, and also on the wider structural racism embedded within society. So, Dr. Lawrence, to what extent do you think things have changed over the years?
Well, I'm so disappointed about the fact that when people have some kind of, when you have an organization that needs rectifying and the government spend all that money to have an inquiry to explain and show you what is wrong with your organization to fix it. 19 years ago or so. And I just feel that if these people had taken what was said seriously and try and make it better for people to feel good about the fact that they are able to call these people who are supposed to be part of our lives and to protect us, that it would be a good thing if they had followed some of the recommendations that were given to them and make it a better place for us all. Unfortunately, so many years later, we're hearing after this case is reviewed that the same actual things that were said in the early days is still happening. I am disappointed, really, really disappointed.
Stephen's both challenging and inspirational story promotes a legacy of hope, change, and aspirations. Dr. Lawrence, what do you see as Stephen's legacy?
One of the main things I've seen as Stephen's legacy, the changing of the double jeopardy law, so that if somebody had been cleared of something that they did in the court, and there's more crucial evidence came later, they can then be retried and sent to prison for what they were accused of. That's one of the main things that happened that allow us to be sitting here and talking about the fact that there's 2 people in prison because of Stephen. The other thing which I feel really good about, although is something that I wish I didn't have to do, it gave me the opportunity to go into different organizations like the CPS, churches, football clubs, schools, and talk to the younger generation, because I felt that sometimes adults make decisions about the way they want to live without having information about other people's way of living. And some people in the early days weren't able to jump on an airplane and go and have holidays to Jamaica or some one of those other countries in the West Indies to see how people live. So they make assumptions about the way we live by not able to see it. When I started going to schools and talking to the youngsters, I was hoping, and I still think this is happening, that they were able to hear from my lips the way we lived in different countries. And then when their parents tell them different things about the way people live without knowing, they would then say, well, we heard Dr. Lawrence came here and told us, so what you're telling us is not right. Mm-hmm. So, the fact that I started going into school, I felt it was a privilege, after the tragedy of losing my son, that I was able to talk with the younger generation.
Dr. Lawrence, can I ask you what your hopes are for the future?
My hopes for the future is that no matter where you come from, no matter where you look, the way you look, because in our country, in Jamaica, we have people from all over the world who came to Jamaica and made a life there. And there's that says it's not utopia, but we know different people from different countries have different ways of living and different languages, and we accept that. And so we treat people as if they are human beings. And we don't make an assumption, because one of the things which I revealed quite a few months ago to people is that they might see me, they might look and see this is a Black person, but they don't know my history. And one of the things which I revealed the other day was that my grandmother, the woman who grew me up, and the person who allowed me to be who I am, was a Jew from Germany, right? So I grew up thinking that my mother was white. For a very long time, I didn't know my real mother until I was 9 years old, when my grandmother told me, my biological mother is coming to see me. I told her, no, you are my mother. I don't know about any other mother. And when my mother came and I met her, I told her I wasn't going to call her mother, because the person I saw over my crib when I was a baby was this white woman who was looking after me. She took a long time. I think maybe about 10 years before I actually called my real mother.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dr. Lawrence, is there anything else that you would like to add before we close this podcast?
The legacy list is unique. You know, we have a Stephen Lawrence Day. I never thought while I was looking after my family that I would lose my first child, and that something like in England, my son's name would be called all over the world. You know, I went to America to visit some of my friends, and I also used to work with a theater company, and we used to do quite a lot of films, dramas and things to do with the way people deal with other people. And we did some films that went to America, to a university. And I was in the Miami airport waiting for my friends to come and collect me. And all of a sudden I heard this man calling out, Dr. Lawrence, Dr. Lawrence. And I'm thinking, well, I'm in America. I'm not in England. How does this man know my name? And he came over. And the first thing I said to him, how do you know me? How do you know me? Why are you calling me? He said, because I watched the film in the University of U, talking about the play that we had saw, and you are part of this play. And I then thinking, we're 5,000 miles away from England, and here is a student from a different university in the Americas calling out my son. Because of my son, this man is calling my name out. So you can see the amount of joy I can feel, and also sorry that my son had to lose his life for me to be able to do some of the things that I'm doing now.
A massive thank you, Dr. Lawrence, for your time and insight. It's an incredible honor and privilege to have that opportunity to speak to you and get an insight into this tragic case. Any other final comments from Rachel or Nathan?
I was just thinking, Dr. Lawrence, when you were talking there about your trip to America and people recognizing you, it just made me think of that time. If you remember, we were in Birmingham at the National Police Chiefs Council's conference, and we were looking for food the night before, and there was a small group of us, and you said you were missing home and wanted some Jamaican food. So we went to a Jamaican restaurant that we found near the conference venue. Do you remember? And it was closed, and there was just a man in there just tidying up. And he came and opened the door and said, "I'm sorry, we're closed on Mondays." I think it was a Monday. And then he suddenly looked at you and he just said, "You're Neville Lawrence, aren't you?" And I remember you said to him, "Yes, I am." And I remember him looking back and saying, "Then we're open." And they opened the restaurant, do you remember? And we had a fantastic meal. And then at the end of the meal, when we came down, the restaurant was full of his friends and family, because he phoned up to say that Neville Lawrence was in his restaurant. And I remember you taking photos with people. And I think for me that really resonated about how powerful your campaign, your fight for justice, or your fight for some justice, as you've called it in the past, has been, and how it resonates through communities far outside of London. You've talked about America, but we were in Birmingham at that time, and to be honest, this has happened elsewhere. It's happened in Portsmouth when we were out as well, when you received your doctorate, and so I think that's a real legacy, not just of Stephen, but of you and your family. And there are many people who owe you and your family a huge debt of gratitude for your refusal to accept what happened to you and to Stephen as being some sort of justice. And your fight for justice is an inspiration to, certainly to me, and it's obvious that it's an inspiration to many other people 30 years on. So thank you.
And also what you just mentioned is that I even forget to mention the fact that I used to go to Portsmouth University quite regular to talk to the students who were in law, to find out for me to explain some of the things that we did to try and get justice, for them to do thesis on it. So we went to so some occasion we went to a couple of weeks ago, and down in Brixton, and on the way back, we was waiting at the bus stop to catch a bus back to Kingston, and this young lady came up, and we were talking, and she was telling us that she used to come to Elephant and Castle when the inquiry was going on, and she was so impressed about the way the family were dealing with things that she became a lawyer. Because I couldn't believe it. I'm thinking the death of my son has caused people to do things that maybe they thought they weren't able to do. And I was so pleased, to congratulate her on doing that. And it's all because of Stephen.
And that's a fantastic legacy, a fantastic legacy.